Yeah, hello, welcome. My name's Stephen Nowakowski, based up in North Queensland, and I'm going to give you a slideshow now of the rollout of renewables across Queensland. I was mostly focused just on the rapid rollout in North Queensland, and now I've expanded across the entire state. And this presentation focuses just on the central Queensland area between Gladstone and Rockhampton. So what are the impacts of poorly planned industrial scale renewable projects in central Queensland, and what are the options? For me to start this presentation, I've got to go back to where it all started for me, because this is, in the context of things, this is sort of how this all plays out. And this is the Mount Emerald wind farm up here in North Queensland, up on the Atherton Tablelands. It was the first industrial wind farm in Queensland. And what we're looking at here is a wind blade, which is 57 metres long. The nearby Shallumban project, the blades will be around 89 metres long, and then the Upper Burdekin wind farm will be around 90, 95, 99 metres long. So the new generation of wind farms, and the ones that I'll talk about later in central Queensland, the blades will be basically twice as long as this. So we're looking at blades twice as long for the new generation wind farms, which I'll talk about. Wind farms such as Moa Creek Wind Farm, Moonlight Range, Mount Hopeful. And as you can see, they're huge pieces of infrastructure. The components are massive. These blades here are 12 tonne. The new generation wind farms, those blades are around the 20 tonne mark. And the nacelles, the centre spindles, ranging in weight from 80 tonne to even 200 tonne. So a lot of weight in these, and quite cumbersome, hence cutting corners, lifting power poles and transmission lines to get this infrastructure through town streets. Going back to Mount Emerald, that's the Mount Emerald Plateau there in front of us. I used to go up there quite often and bushwalk. A spectacular place, wildflowers, little slice of wilderness in North Queensland that wasn't impacted upon, no industrialisation, never ever been any cattle grazing up there because of its inaccessibility and steep slopes and gorge systems. So it was a great place to bushwalk. At the time, the wind farm was going in, and we thought, well, that's the price we need to pay for renewable energy. This wind farm was going to power 70,000 homes. That isn't the case, and I'll talk about that later. But it was a beautiful place, and new renewable energy is what we had to do to transition. And we still do need to transition off fossil fuels, but I don't think we are doing it the right way. And I'll talk about the options later in the presentation. But this is Mount Emerald now. It's a network of haulage roads, transmission lines and substations. It's a very industrialised area. You can actually see a bus just down there below that turbine. That's like a big school bus to give you a sense of scale. Like I said, the new generation turbines are even bigger than this, up to twice as big. So a lot of clearing, a lot of earthworks, civil earth moving. Mount Emerald came and went, and then I heard about the Caban wind farm and went and visited the site through the construction phase, and lo and behold, this is what greeted me. So huge swathes of forest cleared for the haulage roads, through some really nice high altitude forests in North Queensland, a very high rainfall area. And dozers were there clearing. And, so this is an issue with wind farms in Queensland because we don't have good wind in Queensland. The wind farm industry wants to get elevation, so they'll go right up to the tops of hills. So a tremendous amount of earth clearing, land clearing. The proponents don't often give really good, accurate footprints of their proposals, so I'm involved with Rainforest Reserves Australia and we generate our own mapping. I've got a cartography background, and so try to do overlays. As you can see, these are footprints for wind pads. This is the initial clearing on top of a mountain knoll, which has subsequently completely been blasted away. Rock breaking machines, and they just flatten these mountains to smithereens. So as you can see in this video, that hilltop there on the left is what I just showed you previously. Massive amounts of earth moving, and you'll notice minimal sediment control. You know, primary producers, the agricultural industry, need to put in proper sediment control and reef regulations, reef regulation controls. As you can see, there's not much. Massive amounts of earth moving. These wind farms have a lifespan of say 20-25 years. We don't know how the decommissioning is going to play out, who's going to pay for it. These wind farm companies are set up as proprietary limited companies, standalone entities. They can quite easily go into receivership, liquidation, administration, and leave the cost, the cleanup cost and the burden of that to either the host owner of the property or taxpayers. We don't know. This is also Caban Wind Farm. You can see all the haulage roads punched in through the landscape. You've got the Bluff State Forest in the distance and Evelyn Conservation Park. Sometimes it's not necessarily the clearing either, it's the fragmentation of these forests. It's punching in brand new roads, and we've mapped around 4,100 kilometres of brand new roads going to be punched into places like this across the state, into wilderness areas, into wild areas. And a lot of botanists have indicated they're very concerned about all these new roads going into places that haven't been touched before, and the implications with weeds. Yeah, so you can see the cutting that is necessary into steep slopes. And the lights at night. Yeah, so the lights at night are a big issue, particularly in areas that are remote, and all these places are fairly remote, and residents are there for a reason, and all of a sudden the night sky is hindered by lights, and all of a sudden it's an industrial area. It's a rezoning. It's actually a material change of use. The land zoning now for these areas are industrial energy production. Yeah, so after looking at what's going on in North Queensland, I thought I'd start looking. Yeah, so here is a list of the projects between Gladstone and Rockhampton. The green ones are operational, they're built and working. Orange are under construction. Blue are approved at state and federal level, and they're awaiting construction, and the white are the ones proposed. So we're looking at 9,800 hectares of remnant forest to be cleared with these projects, with a total capital cost of $27 billion. So, but what's happening across the whole state of Queensland? And what we have is around 88 projects. But this is already outdated. There's a new project every week being proposed. And I know there's the Woodward wind farm, Genex, there's another big solar park that was announced the other day. And then just doing that slide, that previous slide, I found a few others in central Queensland that have gone under the radar. So you can quite comfortably say there's about 95 projects in the pipeline in Queensland. And when you look at that in a spatial context, that's what it looks like. And then if we want to zoom in to say this area here between Gladstone and Rockhampton, that's how it looks. So all those red lines are the haulage road footprints. There's a few polygons there for like Woodison and Bouldercombe, etc., where I don't physically know where those road footprints are within those subject properties. So every scrap of high elevation country along the coastal ranges that's outside of a national park or a state forest will have a turbine on it. If we dig down a bit closer and look at, say, the Clark Creek wind farm, we can see that the turbine infrastructure, the haulage roads, are going in mostly the green areas, which is classified remnant vegetation. The yellow is of concern, so you can even see up there you've got turbines and roads going into of concern vegetation. The white areas is cleared land. So we all assumed, fighting for climate action, renewable energy was going to go into altered, degraded, cleared land. And what we're seeing is none of these projects, none of the wind projects are going into cleared land. They're all going into mostly remnant vegetation on tops of hills and mountains that have generally escaped urbanisation, industrialisation, high-value agriculture because of its inaccessibility and harsh terrain. This is Clark Creek at the moment, stage 1. There's 2 stages, and you can see a lot of earth moving, no sediment control, no erosion control. Yep, sides of hills just cut out for wind slabs, turbine slabs. There's around 1,200 tonne of reinforced concrete going into each of these foundations. Lotus Creek, this is a really tragic wind farm. It should not be going ahead. It's in classified remnant vegetation, and koalas there are off the charts. The highest koala densities I've ever seen. The ecology reports found 101 koalas within the project area, 138 greater gliders. I've been there twice and found dozens of koalas very easily. That bottom right hand photograph looking up the creek, there's going to be a road cut down that ridge in the foreground, some sort of causeway or bridge over the river or the creek, then a road punched up that ridge. Those exposed slabs in the distance on that ridge line, they're called the Alps, and that's going to be smashed and blasted and covered in turbines. The photo in the top left, every ridgeline there you see basically will have turbines on it and roads. Here I've overlaid a haulage road. The red lines indicate the edges of the road. Black dots indicate the turbine locations, and then the photo on the right is a real photo that I've taken of that site with the drone. Boomer Range, as you can see here, you've got turbines going into classified of concern vegetation. It's just criminal, insane, insanity. But no conservation groups are fighting it. This is climate action, everyone. Best photo of greater gliders I've ever taken on in my life was taken on the Boomer Range wind farm site. And then the Moa Creek wind farm, which I had the fortunate experience of flying over in a helicopter. Spectacular country, cliff lines, beautiful escarpments. These are some photographs out of the helicopter of that Moa Creek wind farm. And basically there'll be turbines on every single ridge you can see there in these photographs. Absolutely criminal. And then it makes you wonder, well, why is it here? Why are these wind farms going into the best bits of forest left in Queensland? And it's all about the transmission lines and not necessarily about the wind. And I can do another slideshow about that, because the main game is not the generation of electricity, it's the generation of certificates to sell to polluters to offset their emissions. So that's what it's all about. It's all about certificates, and put these things close to transmission lines so it's cheap. So, and what I mean by cheap is what we're looking at here is a map of the area between Gladstone and Rockhampton. And those black lines are the transmission lines, the transmission infrastructure. Now, if we look at the first wind farm that was approved and is currently under construction, that's showing stage 2 as well, but stage 1's under construction, that's Clark Creek. So you can see it on the transmission line. It fits right on the transmission line. Lotus Creek just to the north. And then down here is, I think that could be Moa Creek. And then Mount Hopeful. And then a smattering of all the others, Moonlight Range and Boomer Range. And then you've got Specimen Hill, Collide, Banana Range, Caribou Wind Farm, Smoky Creek Solar Park, Aldiga Wind Solar Park. And then there's the Bouldercombe Wind Farm, which I don't have the footprint for, but just the property extents of the subject property of where the wind farm's going. And then the same again for Wooderson. The black dots indicate with the turbine locations, but I don't have the haulage roads yet. And then we've got the Inverray Wind Farm, and the black dots show the locations of wind turbines. Then we've got Moonlight Range in there as well, the blue dots. Should never ever go ahead. That's one of the most stunning, scenic, rugged terrain you'll ever see in your life. I don't know how they're going to do that. Well, I do know how they're going to do it. They're going to use a lot of TNT to blast out those mountains. So as you can see here, that's the layout of all the renewable infrastructure in the pipeline for that central Queensland area. And all of it hugs transmission lines. So the proponents want to be on the transmission lines because it's cheap. If the infrastructure is away from the transmission lines, it costs a lot of money to connect that kit to the transmission line. Depending on the tenure, the geology, the geography, and so forth. Now, if we just go back to the wind farms and the solar farms, these are all the projects in the pipeline. Like I said, there's about 95 in the pipeline. So Queensland-wide, we've got 22,000 megawatts of installed capacity. Queensland needs about 10,000 megawatts. The problem is that the capacity factor of renewables is 15 to 35%. So that 22,000 or close to 23,000 megawatt, you've got to really times that by 15%. or 20%, because none of that power plant, all the solar and all the wind, is never going to operate at 100% at the same time consistently. Therefore, we'd need to double those 88, but I said before 95 projects to sort of reach those targets. All these numbers exclude the critical mineral mining, rare earth mining to facilitate the rollout. It also excludes the vast transmission infrastructure and storage and gas peaking plants when all of this fails, when there is no sun at night and there's no wind at night. Total pumped hydro in the system is 9,000 megawatts. That may deliver up to 24 hours of electricity. So you still need to have gas plants sitting idly to back it all up. Across the state, the mapping indicates there's around 37 hectares endangered. You can see all the figures there. You can just pause on this if you like. But that's all the vegetation to be cleared for those 88 projects, and around 4,600 kilometres of haulage roads to be punched through into mostly wilderness areas. That's the total area to be cleared across the state, 57,000 classified remnant and some non-remnant. You have to remember that when you clear that land, there's going to be edge effects. So with 4,000 kilometres of roads, the edge effects, so there's going to be damage to the forests on either side of the roads. There'll also be altered fire regimes. Those forests will change forever. And there's a lot of scientists out there that have done a lot of research on that, on edge effects of roads. The net zero report that came out recently says that we need to spend 1.5 trillion to 2030 to reach the targets that have been promised, and $7 to $9 trillion over the next 37 years. Why does it cost so much? Well, this slide explains it. Going back to that Mount Emerald wind farm that I spoke to you about earlier, this is the output, the total output for Mount Emerald for the entire year of 2022. So as you can see, for most of the time, it generated less than 10 megawatts of electricity. So if we break, so here looking at Mount Emerald Wind Farm, and for 2022 it only ran at 18.1% capacity factor. So the median, not the mean, the median, which is the proper way of looking at capacity factors because it's at the lower end of the data set. So for 63 days of 2022, it generated zero electricity. If we start talking about hydrogen, this is another ball game. It just blows my brain. That's a footprint of the Murchison hydrogen footprint. You're looking at 50,000 hectares of land, 700 turbines, and 10,000 hectares of solar farms, and then you'll need to dredge out a deep water port. That's what it looks like. So all those white dots are turbines, and the grey in the middle is the solar farm, 10,000 hectares of solar. And basically that view in the distance will just be wind turbines, 700 wind turbines. So my thoughts are, should we be clearing and fragmenting forests for renewables? Are we going down the wrong path that has failed elsewhere? Where is our model for 100% renewables? And which countries are carbon free? It is a climate emergency and all options need to be on the table, and 75% of coal and gas has to be replaced with clean energy. And what are the solutions? Well, I believe the solutions are, and others may have come up with other options, and there are other options. But I believe good renewables such as rooftop solar, small community grids, locally owned wind farms, some industrial with social licence on altered or degraded land. And the second option is nuclear. And I was very against nuclear up until about 3 years ago. I've marched the streets against nuclear, but I've had to put all my ideology aside, look at the facts and the hard data, and nuclear is a no-brainer. It's inevitable basically for Australia to become net zero. You can't do it with renewables. Nuclear must be a part of our solution. And I agree that nuclear, as depicted in the media, appears to have some scary shortcomings: waste, radiation, nuclear weapons, cost and slow rollout speed. However, my research has led me to understand I was misled about nuclear, and most, if not all, of the apparent scary shortcomings are not supported by the scientific literature. I now see nuclear as an important piece of the solution to the climate crisis, and nuclear combined with appropriately placed renewables is a safe, cost-effective way to rapidly reduce fossil fuel generation. James Hansen, the first scientist to raise the alarm about climate change in the US Senate, US government, he is a big advocate for nuclear power. The Dalai Lama understands that nuclear needs to be a part of the solution, otherwise vast amounts of land will need to be occupied by low capacity renewable energy, which is short-lived and expensive. James Lovelock, author of the Gaia Hypothesis, also says in many of his books that nuclear is the only green solution. Dick Smith, I did a bit of research on Dick Smith, and Dick Smith actually campaigned against the Mount Emerald wind farm, Queensland's very first industrial wind farm. He knew it was going to be a gimmick. It wasn't going to deliver the electricity that was promised, and it was going to smash up really good, amazing, high biodiverse forests, and he was right. Bill Gates is doing interesting work trialling new nuclear technology in America. And even our very own Professor Bill Lawrence here at James Cook University in North Queensland, a world expert on forest fragmentation and tropical forest clearing around the world. He's actually written an open letter to environmentalists urging them to consider nuclear energy. Nuclear must be a part of our solution. It eliminates the need for new transmission lines and provides enormous power generation in a tiny footprint. And it can generate 400 megawatt within 18 hectares. %61% of Australians polled are in favour of further investment in nuclear. That can only increase. We need a fast transition off fossil fuels, and renewables help in this regard, but the barriers in place for nuclear must be lifted. And I'm certain they will be, because there is no other way. 100% renewables require more materials and minerals, a physical land footprint that is incomprehensible and is far more expensive than nuclear, as demonstrated in other countries. Nuclear is taking off around the world. Washington State have just announced 12 100 megawatt SMRs to be installed within 10 years. And you can see the list there. And Australia should be on this list, investigating and preparing for the rollout of nuclear in this country. And I think you will find over time more people like me will come out and support nuclear energy. Otherwise, we're going to see so much of this country smashed to smithereens for intermittent, unreliable, expensive renewable energy. And it just breaks my heart. I weep when I think about all those beautiful forests and ridgelines right down the coastal ranges of Queensland that are going to be completely smashed for renewables. It's complete madness. So thank you. Hope this has been interesting. And yeah, so just remember, with the rollout of renewables, there are a lot of consequences on biodiversity in this state of Queensland with this rollout. So anyway, hopefully I've shown you what's planned, because no one else is. The state government aren't showing anybody the cumulative impact of these projects. But anyway, so thank you, thanks for listening, and thanks for tuning in. Thank you, bye.